Angela Danadjieva. This is a name that not everyone can pronounce. I'm not sure I'm doing it justice, but I'm doing my best. She's still apparently active in California at age 89 as a self-proclaimed environmental designer. She was born in 1931 in Sofia, Bulgaria. She went on to pursue a degree in architecture from Bulgaria State University in Sofia. She couldn't find work in architecture at the time in the early 1960s in Bulgaria, and she took a job as a set designer in the film industry. She worked her way up and she became an art director, but she worked in the Bulgarian film industry for a number of years. And, the cited number that she says is, she worked on about 160 movie sets. It included a movie that's often, coupled with her work, The Captured Squadron. It was awarded the first prize at the Bulgarian International Film Festival. It also won the equivalent of the sort of Bulgarian Oscar. It's called the Golden Rose. And she decided to move to Paris, study at the Ecole de Beaux Arts. And she continued there for a couple of years and came to the U.S. ultimately because she had won a competition for the San Francisco Civic Center in 1965. The project was never built. She set up an office, but she was quickly introduced to Lawrence Halprin, and he invited her to work in his expanding firm at the time, multidisciplinary firm, Lawrence Halprin Associates. He assured her creative freedom. I think what's so interesting is that she was clearly aligned with a lot of Halprin's ideals about choreographic principles. I think her cinematic training was attractive to Halprin, but also their social improvement through design. She worked actually at the firm, I think, almost 10 years and got project designer on some major projects that her best known of which is Seattle Freeway Park. And she also was the primary hand in what's now called the Ira Keller Fountain in Portland, which is the plaza that looks onto the auditorium. She goes on after 1976 to found her own multidisciplinary firm in partnership with Thomas Koenig. She's continued to work on environmental design scale. And, she's responsible for a significant project in Indianapolis, a river promenade. She did an important planning study for James River Park in Richmond. And what's so interesting about her is she really sort of successfully works across scale, from the complex regional scale, working from everything sort of ecological design down to the micro scale of the human body. But the very best known works for where she really got her sort of primary recognition is at the Ira Keller Fountain and Seattle Freeway Park. What I think is so interesting about these projects is, in particular, Seattle Freeway Park is, her clear ability to marry her background in cinema, in set design, with urban public space design. She was asked in a 5.5 acre park, again, leading as a project designer, to compress a public park amenity which served to rejoin the downtown with the First Hill neighborhood, which had been severed from downtown because of the construction of Interstate 5, which is a 12-lane sunken highway. So it was a really, seminal project in terms of Halprin's career as well, and the history of landscape architecture. But she recognized that there was, I think it was close to a 50-foot grade change that she had to overcome. And she was working with a compressed space. And she, with this limited space, she creates a sort of varied emotional impact, which can very easily be connected to how one would operate in set design in terms of the spatial variation, the psychological impacts, the sort of peaks of drama everywhere from the canyon fountain, which is sort of like the climax of the drama, to the mountain meadow. In describing her choreography of the frames of movement through Seattle Freeway Park, she talks about tight areas with close-up views can be used in attaining a dramatic feeling. And she makes the association like standing in a narrow canyon with water splashing all around the viewer. Middle ground views can be employed for observation and personal reflection. Distant views will offer panoramas and opportunities for sightseeing. Her work with water is about bringing it to the foreground, really. I mean, it's about bringing you up close with this sort of primal element. And I sort of speaking in the language of Halprin, and it's hard not to, but, I'm positive that they impacted each other, despite, I think, what sort of evolved into potentially a little bit of a turf war over who was responsible for what. But I mean, they sort of had this artistic and intellectual connection that made so much sense why they were in the same place at the same time. Stewarding her legacy is important. I think she has been, and I think I'm one of these people that have sort of written her into the historical record as an affiliate of Halprin without really carving out the contributions that she uniquely made to the profession, both with the firm and beyond. Her hand is so clear in these most notable spaces in Portland and in Seattle. Also in the Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond, Washington State Capitol grounds, absolutely. And Polk Park, which is, it's interesting because that was newer to me, but the approach is very similar.